It was Caesar's last battle. He almost lost, and the margin was a single order from the wrong man. The Pompeian general Labienus had picked a hill in Spain and formed a tight, disciplined, defensive line. Caesar's men were advancing uphill, outnumbered, and taking fire from soldiers who had every advantage. Caesar's men were retreating, and a battle that had looked unwinnable was about to reverse completely. Then, Labienus made one decision, a routine, sensible decision, and 30,000 of his own men died. By March of 45 BC, the Roman civil war had been grinding across the Mediterranean for 4 brutal years. Caesar had beaten Pompey at Pharsalus, hunted his allies across continents, and kept winning every engagement. But Pompey's sons had made it to Spain, with an army larger than anything Caesar had faced since the war. Spain was Pompeian territory. The legions, the towns, the supply lines, all ran against Caesar's advance. Labienus had served under Caesar in Gaul and understood exactly how Caesar fought and what he needed. He knew Caesar needed a decisive engagement, and that his supply situation was tighter than the Pompeian position. Patience, Labienus calculated, was the one weapon Caesar could not counter, so he waited on high ground. Caesar eventually had to come to him, and both men knew exactly what was about to begin. The site Labienus chose was near the town of Munda, in what is now the dry south of Spain. It was a long ridge, elevated enough to neutralize cavalry on the flanks and anchor the defensive line. The hill was not cliff steep. It was just inclined enough to exhaust attacking troops before they made contact. In ancient warfare, attacking uphill is never simply a disadvantage. It is a compounding disadvantage every step. Every javelin thrown downhill travels farther and hits harder. Every step uphill costs the attacker more energy. A line holding the high ground with equal numbers is effectively a larger army. The physics of slope do it. Labienus had 13 legions and 6,000 cavalry, veterans who had drilled on this kind of ground for years. These were soldiers who had served in Spain under Pompey's command, who knew this countryside and believed their cause. Their morale was high, their position was strong, and Caesar's army was approaching across flat ground toward the slope. Every terrain advantage belonged to Labienus, and he had arranged his forces to make full use of every one. Caesar arrived with 8 legions, somewhere between 30 and 40,000 legionaries plus 8,000 cavalry. His most reliable veterans were centered on the right, the famous Legio ex Equestris, his hardest hammer. Pompeians deployed across the crest in standard formation. Infantry center, cavalry and auxiliaries anchoring both flanks. Labienus placed himself on the left flank with his own cavalry, the position where he expected Caesar to strike. A general commanding his cavalry on a wing is a general who expects to need rapid, personal decisions about movement. Labienus was worried about the 10th Legion, Caesar's best, on the right, and he stationed himself to meet it. He had the right formation, the right position, and the right personal instinct about where the danger would come from. Both armies faced each other across the slope, one holding, one attacking, and the physics of the ground favored one. Caesar ordered the advance. His legions moved across flat ground and began the uphill push toward the Pompeian line. The slope worked exactly as Labienus had designed. Caesar's men were winded before they made initial contact. The Pompeian infantry held the crest and let the attackers come, releasing javelins into the climbing formation. Caesar walked along his own line, something commanders did when troops needed to see their generals sharing the risk. For a long stretch of the morning, the battle was precisely what Labienus had planned, a grinding uphill failure. Caesar's legions did not break. These soldiers did not panic or fold, but neither were they winning anything. Every charge that crested the ridge met fresh defenders who had not burned energy climbing the slope in sun and dust. The ancient sources describe Caesar feeling something close to despair. his best troops grinding and making no progress.
He had committed his veterans.
He was losing men on the slope, and the Pompeian line showed no sign of breaking. Something had to change, and the change was going to come from where Labienus was standing,
They break on the
not
left.
where Caesar
Commit
was.
the reserve.
Labienus had watched Caesar's right flank carefully for hours, tracking the cavalry massing around the 10th Legion. Every
right
time
flank,
Caesar's
double
best
time.
cavalry massed on the right, Labienus had responded by
Standards
adjusting his
forward.
own left position. The threat was clear. If Caesar's cavalry broke through the left and swept behind the infantry center, the battle ended. An
Hold
army
the
attacked
line.
from two
Protect
directions
the standard.
simultaneously
We are surrounded.
loses cohesion
To me.
fast.
Don't
This is not a
break.
recoverable
Stand
situation
firm.
in any era.
Move
So when
the
Caesar's
cohorts
right-wing
to the left
cavalry
flank.
massed
Quickly,
again
they are breaking
and appeared to be
formation.
preparing a serious
Orders
assault,
from the commander. Move
Labienus
the
issued
cohorts.
the order. He ordered his cavalry from the Pompeian right to ride across the rear of the formation and reinforce the threatened left. The logic was entirely sound. Move strength to the threatened point before the gap opens, not after it collapses. Military commanders have done versions of this lateral redeployment in every era of organized warfare. It was not controversial. The
Move
principle
out.
was not
To the
controversial.
left flank.
The
Quickly.
execution was not complicated, and there was every reason to believe it would work. Labienus gave the order. His cavalry from the right wing started moving. The decision was made and could not be unmade. Labienus's cavalry rode behind the Pompeian infantry line, crossing from the right wing toward the threatened left. The movement was real. The destination was the left flank. The tactical purpose was reinforcement, not flight, not retreat. But the
Why are they
Pompeian
leaving the
infantry in
field?
the center, watching their cavalry disappear from the right,
Did they receive new
drew
orders?
a
We
completely
did not.
different conclusion. They saw
Centurions,
cavalry leaving the
refuse
field,
flank.
not
Second
moving to
cohort,
reinforce.
pivot right.
In the noise
Lock
and
shields.
dust,
Ready the
cavalry
pillar.
was simply gone. In ancient armies, communications were visual. A soldier in the third row cannot ask the general what the cavalry is doing. He can only see that the cavalry that was there is no longer there, and fear fills whatever explanation logic cannot reach. In a battle where Caesar's veterans have been pressing uphill all morning, the visual cue had only one meaning. Cavalry riding away from the field means one thing in any language any soldier has ever known. The panic spread from the right edge of the Pompeian infantry toward the center within a matter of minutes. Men began stepping back, then turning. An ancient infantry formation that starts running is no longer a formation at all. The line did not bend and recover. It broke completely, and 30,000 soldiers became a crowd running from themselves. Caesar saw the break happen. The accounts are clear that he was watching the Pompeian line and recognized it instantly. He gave two orders in rapid succession: press the advance and sweep the flanks before the retreating soldiers could regroup. Both orders came at the exact right moment. Not too early, not too late. At the precise instant, collapse was real. Caesar's timing in exploiting a collapse was not luck. It was 40 years of command in conditions far worse than Munda. He understood that the window in which a broken formation can still be annihilated is narrow and closes fast. Troops who are fleeing but not yet caught will sometimes stop, rally, and turn. And that possibility had to be closed. His infantry pushed up the slope into the gap where the Pompeian line had stood just minutes before. His cavalry hit the flanks of the retreating soldiers before they could clear the ridge and open any distance. The Pompeian soldiers who fled toward Munda ran to a town that would not open its gates to the defeated army. The soldiers who ran into the open fields were run down by cavalry. There was almost nowhere to go. Caesar's men did not stop until there was nothing left to pursue, and the light was beginning to fade from the field. The ancient sources give the Pompeian dead at around 30,000. Caesar's losses at approximately 1,000. These numbers are almost certainly rounded, but the ratio describes what always happens when an ancient army breaks in open field. A rout is more lethal than the battle that precedes it. The killing at Munda happened primarily after the line broke. Caesar walked the battlefield afterward, something commanders did to account for losses and understand what had actually happened. He reportedly said he had often fought for victory, but this was the first time he had fought for his life. That sentence, if he said it, is the most honest assessment of Munda in any source from the ancient record. Labienus died in the fighting, one of the few senior Pompeian commanders to fall on the field rather than flee. Gnaeus Pompeius escaped, but was caught and killed weeks later. The organized resistance had no senior leadership left. Sextus Pompeius fled and would cause trouble for another decade. But the military threat of the Pompeian faction was finished. The civil war that had begun when Caesar crossed the Rubicon in 49 BC ended at this hill in Spain in March 45.
The mechanism of that ending
Was a single cavalry order issued by a talented general who could not control what his infantry saw. Labienus was right. The order made complete sense, and it destroyed everything he had built on that hill in 1 minute. That is the lesson Munda still carries. The most dangerous military mistake is the one that looks nothing like a mistake.